What's up, everyone? I am Austin Eckler, and you are listening to the HuddleUK podcast.
Very warm welcome into the huddle this week. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening wherever that may be, on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or over at HuddleUK.com. Really appreciate you tuning in this Christmas festive episode of the Huddle UK podcast. I'm the host, Philip Marsh, as always. We had a bye week a few weeks ago, and then last week I have to just hold my hands up. Work, Christmas, and everything just got a little bit too much last week. So apologies for a second bye week on the Huddle UK podcast. I did just wake up on Saturday and realise that there was no podcast. So apologies about that. And also, as I mentioned on the last episode that came out, we are still having some technical difficulties over on the website, which has been a bit slow to load. So apologies if you've gone over that. There are still stories going up every day, regardless. You just have to be a little bit more patient when they load. Lots of big news this week that myself and Jake are going to get into shortly. But yeah, go check out all the articles over at HuddleUK.com. Thank you for listening to this. If you're on YouTube, remember to click the subscribe button. And let's jump into all the action, all the news. We're going to be predicting this week how the playoffs would go if they finish today. A lot of the seedings look pretty, not necessarily the order, but the teams look pretty set. Now there's only 9 teams in the AFC that can make the playoffs. Technically, it's 10 in the NFC, but Dallas's chances are slim to none. So we're really getting down to the nitty gritty now, and Jake and I are going to put our knowledge and our expertise, in inverted commas, on the line today. Jake, let's start with Thursday night football, because what a game that was last night. There's so many talking points. Puka Nacua, just excellent again. I think he had 3 catches of over 40 yards, a touchdown, but it wasn't to be. The whole Sam Darnold can't play big games myth well and truly dispelled. He had his moments. He had some wobbly throws.
He did, yeah.
But what a game. What an absolute thriller.
I mean, you say big games. I just say, can Sam Darnold not play the Los Angeles Rams? Because there was a genuine point coming into this game where I thought that wasn't the case, but he managed to prove us wrong. And yeah, I think that was an early Christmas gift from the NFL, I would say, because we've had some really rotten Thursday night football and Monday night football games in recent memories. So that was a nice one from Roger.
Yeah, it was certainly a nicer schedule. There was lots of talking points. As I mentioned, Puka Nacua had a huge game. JSN didn't have a catch at halftime, and I know all the fantasy football players who have JSN in their fantasy playoff teams were panicking, myself included, at the break.
Just how many is that, though, Phil? Do you want to give the listeners how much stock do you have in JSN?
I have a lot of stock in JSN, and hey, it's good stock. He's the wide receiver one in football.
It has paid off this season. Although there have been, I think now, this is at least 2 games in recent memory. I think it was the blowout victory a few weeks ago. I couldn't actually tell you who that was.
Against the Vikings, yeah.
It was against the Vikings, yeah. Where again, we didn't hear JSN's name until the second half, which again, yeah, it was very frustrating for fantasy football players. But they've had their fill this year. Pardon pun, but they have had their fill of kind of good fortune from him, so they can't really complain much.
Yeah, one of my key leagues where I'm in the final is the playoff final this week. I know a lot of leagues are in the semi-final stage, but I'm in one dynasty league where we're in the final as a co-chair, and we have Puka Nacua and JSN. So what a way to start. The odds are already up to about 80% after Thursday night football, which is very, very pleasing from my perspective. The biggest talking point in this game, which I want to get your views on and give some of my own, was the 2-point conversion. The Seahawks were 16 points down in the fourth quarter. They needed 2 touchdowns, 2 2-point conversions. The first one, fine. And then the second one was it has to be the strangest 2-point conversion, or successful 2-point conversion in NFL history. I've never seen anything like it. If you haven't seen it, it's basically a backwards pass from Darnold, it's almost lateral. It's almost absolutely lateral. It's marginally backwards. That flicks off first the hand and then the helmet of a Rams defender. I'm not sure which Rams defender it is. Comes off the back of the helmet into the end zone, and everyone thinks the play's dead. Everyone thinks it's an incomplete pass. And Zach Charbonnet just reaches down, like casually, no one's going for the ball, just reaches down, picks up the ball, which is on the line of the end zone, and everyone goes away. And then next thing you know, suddenly there's a TV booth review and they're looking at the play and you realise Zach Charbonnet's actually picked up a live football on the 2-point conversion in the end zone. It's absolutely insane. And what a way for the Seahawks to get back into it and then ultimately go on to win the game. I can't think of any play in NFL history that I've ever seen which comes remotely close to this in terms of bizarreness.
No, and it's a really difficult thing to research, as I found out this week. It's not exactly easy to just simply Google or ask kind of ChatGPT to find you the most bizarre plays, at least something with meaning, right? I think one thing I'd love to know, and I'm sure that someone would be able to point it out, but what happens in that scenario if the referee actually just picks the ball up, not really knowing that player is not technically dead yet? What happens in that scenario? I think what's probably on the Rams' mind right now is that they always say, and you see it play after play after play, even when it's quite clearly a bounced ball or it's not really a fumble, but there's a loose ball, a defender or an offensive player for that, the coaches teach you, jump on that ball.
Yeah.
Claim that ball, even if you're 90% sure that it's not really a fumble, claim that ball. And game on the line pretty much, and nobody really moved. And even Zach I could understand if Charbonnet had jumped on and been the only person, nonchalantly picked it up like he was just it was bizarre. And I think whoever in the booth spotted that and thought, hang on a minute, let's take a look into this. The NFL must be absolutely ecstatic. The broadcasters would have been ecstatic because that really turned that game into what then became an overtime shootout. So kudos to whoever dug out the rule book and said, hang on just a minute here. That was actually a backwards pass by Sam Darnold, because nobody was thinking that was kind of in play at all.
Do you agree with it? Obviously, that is the rule. We can't agree or disagree with the rules. That is the rules. But do you think it's fair? Because Tom, who's a good friend of ours, who has been on this podcast before, messaged me saying clearly everyone thought the play was dead. As you used the words nonchalantly, which is how Zach he doesn't even. There's no diving on the ball. He stands next to the ball, leans down, and just grabs it with his hand. It is the most nonchalant touchdown ever.
Absolutely.
But do you think it's? I mean, if you're a Rams fan, you can't really argue because it is the rules. But you must be absolutely gutted and slightly miffed, I'd imagine.
I mean, you are. I'd say if they were wearing Buffalo Bills colours, I'd probably still turn around to the defence and say, you could still, destiny was in your own hands there if you just simply follow through and pick up that ball before Charbonnet does. So I would still look to the defence and say, you have allowed the opportunity there for the interpretation to come in. And I think that's ultimately it. Do I agree with it? I think absolutely, because one thing the NFL and most sports can never really get away from is subjectivity, right? So you're always going to deal with the fact that referees will call it one way or the other, and then you have to find the rules to overturn it either direction. The more you can make it black and white, the less you leave for injustice to take over. And I will say that one thing that the NFL and most American sports really try to navigate and stay away from is injustice in sports in terms of refereeing decisions. It leaves a really bad taste in their mouth. In this country, Phil, for some reason, our sports seem to love it. Cricket going on right now, we seem to just say, oh, well, the dismissal in cricket happened and they got it wrong, but there you go, that's the game. And football never seems to go a dull moment, without VAR kind of trying to screw
I think
something
it happened in the Scottish Premiership today. There's some statement had to come out from the head of referees up there saying we don't have a handball problem after a catastrophic decision. I don't know the details, but I remember seeing that headline. So, yeah, you're right. We love the drama.
Yeah, and this podcast is probably more coverage than that would have had anywhere else outside of Scotland. But I think what the NFL has done really, really well is they've tried to make things as black and white and as restricted. So I do think that, yes, as soon as you turn around and say, well, the play was clearly technically dead, I think you then get into the realms of, well, when is a play truly dead? My argument is if you look at a tush push is dead when players stop moving forward, which is actually relatively early on in the push. But there are other situations where you get players will stop and then there'll be a bit more of a shove from other players. So we don't want to get into the realms of when is a play dead. And I think that's why it's crucial that the NFL did the right thing actually in this scenario and upheld it and made a game of it.
I'm with you 100% on this one. There was, I can't remember the game. I think it was the Bucks Saints. It was the Bucks someone, and they had it was, I think, a forced fumble or some sort of defensive turnover, and they got whistled dead. And on the replay, they were like, "Oh, there was definitely a whistle this season a few weeks ago." And then they played the replay, and there was no whistle. And that was a controversial one at the time. And then Tom argued, and he's like, well, was the play blown dead? I'm not sure if it happens because obviously 2-point conversions are untimed. So I'm really intrigued, when, as you said, what would have happened if the referee didn't, pick the ball up? What would happen if they just left the ball there?
Yeah.
Can you imagine everyone just goes back to the sidelines and then the referees are still just like awkwardly looking at each other, waiting for someone to
come back on for this?
Just run back off from the sideline to grab the ball. So a really bizarre moment, but a great game. It seemed, obviously you can't have two NFC teams in the Super Bowl, but that would have been a very Super Bowl caliber game where both defenses had their moments, both offensive had their moments, and the superstars showed up. You said to me before we went recording that you had a great stat, and if you've ever listened to the HuddleUK podcast, we love a stat. And in fact, Jake's stats over the last few weeks over on YouTube or over on TikTok, where you can find all the clips from this podcast, they've been some of the most watched videos we've ever had. We had the Staten Island Stapleton Jack Shapiro. And his shortest height. We had 100 years as well since the first NFL lifetime ban. So some great little tidbits, as well as my ranting about the Monsters Inc. game. That was a good fun last time. But go on, hit me with your Thursday night football stat.
So Puka had a bit of a day of it on Thursday night football. He had 225 receiving yards on 12 receptions. Right. Not the biggest day we've had on a Thursday in the NFL in history. Now, in the modern era, the record goes to a receiver who broke the record last season. Can I
guess?
You can guess. Go for it.
Was it Jerry Jeudy?
No, it wasn't. That's a good guess. It's a good guess.
I remember Jerry Jeudy having an absolute monster game, and I thought it was prime time, and it was against Denver. And it was with Jameis Winston just lobbing him passes. And I can't remember what he went for, but it was that record was the highest number of receiving yards by a wide receiver against his former team. So I thought it might have been a Thursday. Are you going to do a quick Google search on this one?
So I am doing a quick check because I do remember that game, and I can tell you that was prime time. But it was probably not a Thursday, as it doesn't come up.
It wasn't a Thursday. How many yards did he have?
No. So Jerry had 235 yards though. So Jerry does top, and it was against Denver.
I'll take it as a good guess, even if I'm wrong.
It's a solid guess. It's a Monday night football game, so it's a great guess if this was a prime time stat. But it's not.
Damn it. But it's Thursday night specifically. Thursday night specifically. I think you said before we recorded that I'm not going to like this. So was it against the Chargers?
No, the reason why you're not going to like it is because the secondary fact, more so, is an unguessable statistic. It's not against the Chargers. It is an AFC North matchup that produced it.
Okay, and AFC North matchup, and I'm trying to think of players who had an absolutely nuclear game. Well, I mean, I obviously instinctively go to Jamar Chase or
and
T.
you
Higgins.
Would be right to go
it was
to Jamar Chase.
Is it?
It was, yeah. Jamar Chase so he holds the modern era record for the 35-34 shootout on Thursday Night Football with the Ravens in week 10 of 2024. He had 264 receiving yards on 11 receptions, 3 touchdowns. So I think that's a big one as well, because that obviously lives long in the memory of fantasy football players who he won a lot for. So yeah, between them, you got DJ Moore as well, who had a nice day in week 5 of 2023 when Chicago thumped Washington. But the reason why I bring this up is because there is someone who in the pre-Super Bowl era actually has the record for the most receiving yards on a Thursday. It is a chap by the name of Jim Benton, right? What I find wonderful about this is that Jim Benton means that Puka doesn't actually have the Rams record for Thursday Night Football receiving yards, because that goes to Jim Benton, who, when they were the Cleveland Rams in 1945, he posted 10 catches for 303 receiving yards in a 28-21 victory. Now, would you
30-yard average a catch on 10 catches?
30-yard average a catch. The staggering thing here is he only scored 1 touchdown in the game, which, if you think about having 303 receiving yards, that's actually quite difficult to do.
They must have all been drive starters, because if any pass happened in, the red zone, his average would have come crashing down.
You'd think so. Now, his quarterback of the day was a chap called Bob Waterfield, legendary Rams quarterback of that era. Would you like to guess how many passing yards he had, considering Jim Benton had 303 receiving yards?
Based on your question, I'm going to say something like 320.
329. He had 329. There were only 2 pass catchers in the entire game. Jim caught 10 catches for 303, and a guy called Steve Pritko caught 2 for 26. And that was the game. Yeah. So I just find that absolutely fascinating, that not only does Puka obviously not have the Thursday night record in the NFL, but he also doesn't even have the Rams record, because that still goes to Jim Benton from 1945. So
well, there we are.
What a game.
There is your niche HuddleUK stat over the week. Merry Christmas on that one, and I swear the names get more and more made up each time. So excellent knowledge there and research. We'll move on from the Thursday night game. It was a thriller. If you stayed up and watched it, good decision. I caught some of it and then was very tired. But thriller, absolute thriller. We'll touch briefly on what happened last week. Obviously, as I said, we didn't have a podcast last week, so there were some big stories, and more so the stories which have followed since that. Which one should we start with? Let's start with the Dolphins, out of playoff contention, and now no Tua. Well, Tua's there, but it's going to be Quinn Ewers under center going forward this season, or at least this weekend. So Lee, our Dolphins writer over at HuddleUK, has had his say on it. He thinks it's a very sort of bold decision. The question here isn't, is Quinn Ewers going to do well? There's no better game for him to have against the Bengals defense. If you're going to try and look good on your first start, that's the way to do it, particularly as a 7th round quarterback. Brock Purdy was the 7th round quarterback. Sometimes it works, but he might be the quarterback of the future here. Is Tua's job under threat? That's the big question here. What everyone is wondering is Tua going to be the starter come week 1 of next season? Because his contract is enormous. That's the biggest sort of stumbling block towards Quinn Ewers winning this job going forward. But we've seen it happen. Kirk Cousins is on millions and he's sitting on the bench, or what he was until Michael Penix got injured. So how do you think this plays out in Miami?
So I think you may not like this, but I think it's got absolutely nothing to do with Quinn Ewers, to be perfectly frank. I think regardless of whether Quinn looks good or not this year, I think that the way in which this is decided is twofold. One, it seems like the seat is maybe cooling for Mike McDaniel, and he might actually stick around. We don't know that for certain. There hasn't been a new GM named yet in Miami. That probably won't happen for a good few months yet. But I think that is the bigger piece, is if that GM decides to come in and fire Mike McDaniel and bring in a new coach and say, I want you to ride with Tua until we find an alternative option. I do not want to eat that dead cap hit immediately. Give me time to make other moves. Then we will eat the dead cap. Then we will bring in someone else. Ride with Tua for now. Then fair enough. That's the deal. I think that if Mike McDaniel stays, I think we've seen the last of Tua in Miami. Ultimately, I think that is the moves that McDaniel's making, the way he has come out and said that right now Quinn Ewers gives us the best chance at winning football games. I think ultimately shows that potentially Tua has lost a little bit of the dressing room, lost the faith of the coaches as well, and I'd be surprised if Mike is still there to see Tua still kind of taking snaps week 1 of 2026. So yeah, hopefully Quinn Ewers is the guy, because it's a great story if he is. I think he played a lot in college, and he was previously quite highly touted. The fact that he went in the 7th probably just shows you that with the quarterback draft, I think that quite often we see very pro-ready quarterbacks who stay too long in college, and then teams almost cool on them a little bit to say, you're just not wowing me and I'm not impressed anymore. I've seen too much of you in a way. I think Quinn Ewers might have actually done better coming into the NFL sooner when he really kind of hit form in college. We probably saw too many ugly plays due to how long he stayed. So I think he's probably better than being a 7th rounder. But again, we don't have a great track record in the NFL of having non-first round quarterbacks stick around as the starter for any length of time. I mean, you can count them on one hand, technically. So, so I don't think it's necessarily linked to Quinn too much. I think it's more linked to the GM that comes in and looks at that contract and says, I've got to swallow this at some point, probably. But I think that moment is coming. I do think that Tua is probably done.
Yeah, I would lean the same way, which is crazy. As a Chargers fan, I'm just so thrilled that the whole Tua Herbert debate is finally over, because for years it was who was the better, and I don't think anyone right now can make an argument that it's Tua over Justin Herbert.
Yeah,
That's
not one that I've heard lately. So I feel like that's been more circulating in Chargers waters and Dolphins waters than it has kind of league wide, because that for me has been decided upon a while ago in my mind.
Well, yeah, I would have thought so, but trust me, based on social media circles, it's been a hot debate. Just to very, very briefly go back to Thursday Night Football, because I've just had quotes pop up on my screen from Matthew Stafford from the game last night, who raises a good point, because we were talking about when the play is dead, but he's saying he wants to get clarification from the league, and makes the very good point that within 2 minutes and on 2-point plays, you can't advance fumbles, which I then don't know, because a backwards pass is considered a fumble because it's backwards. Mm-hmm. It was advanced by Charbonnet. So I think that's suddenly thrown a bit of a spanner in the works on my confidence of that the play was good, because that is a fair point that Stafford makes there.
Is it still a fumble if the first player to touch it after the quarterback is a defender? I think it hits maybe Kobe Turner, but
I think it's Kobe Turner, yeah. But we're asking the question, and so's Matthew Stafford. So it's not a case of we don't know the rules. Clearly, even MVP caliber Matthew Stafford doesn't know the rules here. So it is a big debate. The other thing that this story has popped up with, and I won't put you on the spot too much, because there's at least one name in this list you will not get. But Stafford last night, or when the podcast comes out, it's Saturday, but on Thursday night, became just the 5th player ever with 450 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions, and still lost. Can you name any of the other 4 off the top of your head? One of them springs to mind because it was a big game. I think it was last year. Still a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. And the other 3 are all retired.
So they have to have 450, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions.
Yes, correct.
Good God. I want to say there was a game last season. Wasn't it the Josh Allen Rams game? Didn't he have a really big game, but still lost?
He might have, but it's not him.
One of them.
It's not him. No, it's a NFC North quarterback.
NFC North quarterback. Well, that probably suggests it would be a Jared Goff situation.
It was, Jared Goff. Jared Goff did it. 450 plus yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The others, for those stat boffins out there, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger, and Matt Castle fits in at the end of this list. Only 5 players ever to do it.
Patriots, Matt Castle.
It doesn't say here, but
Okay.
I will have to look that one up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was Patriots. Maybe on YouTube I'll have a little box at the bottom to say if it was or not. So yeah, anyway, that was a very brief segue back into Thursday Night Football because clearly nobody knows the rule, including us. So it'll be interesting to see what the NFL come out and say about that. We've touched on the other. I mean, you hate to see it, even as a Chargers fan. I hate to see it when star players in the NFL go down, and we lost. As in the NFL, lost two of its best players on Sunday in Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs and then Micah Parsons for the Packers. Particularly, with no disrespect to Patrick Mahomes, but the Micah Parsons ones feels bigger right now, simply because the Chiefs season was over. The Chiefs, look, theoretically, if Mahomes stayed on the field, they could have tied the game or won the game. But even then, the playoff hopes were very, very slim, and they just didn't look like they were playing good enough football. Obviously, the concern for Mahomes will be whether he's fit to play for the start of next season. But this brings in at least a mini rebuild or a retooling, at least, for the Kansas City Chiefs, who, for the first time since Flappy Bird was on everyone's mobile, isn't going to the postseason.
Wow.
Yeah, that really put it in time frame for me when someone
Not
posted
not
that.
the reference I was anticipating, but
No,
I'm here for it.
It really put it in a moment in time for me. It
Yeah.
was the last time the Chiefs didn't make the postseason was when Flappy Bird was all the rage,
Right.
which is absolutely crazy. But yeah, Micah Parsons, the Green Bay Packers, so competitive this year. We mentioned it on the last podcast. They've had their ups, they've had their downs this year. They've had games where they look like they can't move the ball. But Parsons, despite not having the most sacks in the league, has the highest pressure rate. He's been unbelievably good.
Yeah.
We always knew he was going to be. This isn't a surprise. But what are the Packers' hopes now going forward? Because it feels in a different position when the Chargers lost Joe Alt for the season. It felt like, okay, this is still a very good team. The Packers is going to be a very good team.
Yeah.
They won't be easy to beat in the playoffs or in the last 3 weeks of the season. But this takes them down at least 2 tiers for me in terms of likelihood of winning a Super Bowl. I think if you put Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt in this Chargers team, I think they can win a Super Bowl. I think if you put Micah Parsons back in the Packers team, they might be able to win a Super Bowl. But without them in both instances, I now don't see them as genuine contenders. But it is, well, that's my view. Do you think that's too harsh?
I think that's 1 tier too harsh. Sorry, you've really choked me up there with the Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater talk. So I think what's interesting with the Packers is that if we go back to the start of the season and you think about how they as a team would have been preparing for the season to come, you've got players like Lucas Van Ness on the edge, you've got Rashawn Gary on the edge, both first round picks of their own. So Brian Gutekunst has invested first round picks in edge rushers in Green Bay already. Clearly didn't think there was enough. Now, with with the best will in the world, Jeff Hafley, who's had a sensational start to his time as defensive coordinator in Green Bay since coming over, he would not have been planning for Micah Parsons being on his roster when he drew up and spent all summer drawing up his play schemes. You just wouldn't do that, would you? You wouldn't plan for a superstar to land. Even if Brian turned around to him and said, "I'm going to go get him," plan for it, you'd go, "Well, I'll believe you when he's on the roster, thanks." And when I've seen him and when I've adapted to him. Now, with that in mind, when Micah then lands in Green Bay and he misses kind of the first week and then is in the lineup, how quickly has Jeff changed the way they play? Not really. He's not accommodating for Micah in any case, and he's not getting the most out of him. So we've seen Micah heat up over the course of the season, and like you say, reach this level where his pressure rate is excellent, and he's really contributing. He's closing games out for them, and he's been arguably well worth the draft capital investment. So it is a massive shame that now that Jeff has finally pivoted to a position where they basically now are lining Micah up, and then wherever the opposition compensate to stop Micah, they then target with the other kind of caliber rushers that they've got in the team. And now that's gone. So he's got to throw all the stuff that he's finally prepared and got working. He's got to throw that all back out and go back to pretty much whatever he had back at the start of the summer. Having said that, do I think that Packers team wasn't ready to make a playoff run, and wasn't able to win a Super Bowl. I think they were capable. I don't think they would necessarily have been favourites. I think the Micah Parsons trade definitely made them a more interesting kind of complement to the idea. And I think looking at them now, I do think they can still win it. My bigger issue is actually the inconsistencies on the offensive side of the ball, and why I don't think that missing players like Tucker Kraft, and then Christian Watson's obviously a doubt now moving forward again. They're just moving. They're missing a few too many offensive pieces for me. Josh Jacobs has got his knee inflammation, although he's now catching passes, which managed to send me home from our fantasy league, which was wonderful. That he kind of caught a touchdown in spectacular fashion against me after I've been such an advocate for him all year. But no, I don't think you're overly harsh with that kind of version. I would take them down a peg, and I wouldn't have them as favourites. But I do still think that as a team, they've not lost a lot from the field. And it's going to sound crazy, but they sent 2 firsts and Kenny Clark to Dallas for Micah Parsons. So it's not like they've lost a really big piece from the lineup. What we might see here is that they've invested their future in Micah Parsons. That future is gone, and obviously now it's about how soon can they get him back to his best, basically, which probably is going to be the best part of 12 months at least.
Yeah, you'd imagine so. You mentioned that Josh Jacobs touchdown. One of my favourite stats of all time was Josh Jacobs, because he had 212 receptions before scoring a receiving touchdown.
Yeah.
He was the rushing leader for the Raiders. He had countless touchdowns, but yeah, it took him 212 passes before he actually had a receiving touchdown. That was in October of last year. I'm just looking up now to see if that was the next one. Receiving, yeah, that's only his second ever receiving touchdown.
It's good, isn't it?
And what a grab. It's an unbelievable catch.
Yeah.
There was some unbelievable pass catches this year. And I know I'm a Chargers fan, and I know I always go back to it. But Deion Henley caught an interception from a Patrick Mahomes throw on Sunday, which looked like he was a wide receiver. It was unbelievable. Turn around, locate the ball, over the shoulder catch. I was just like, what the hell's going on here?
Most of these guys, when they were kind of college or at least high school, were probably playing on both sides of the ball. So I think there's, sometimes some of these players have kind of pivoted from a role quite late, and you kind of see that they've still got it. Like, it's still there, and they still really, really enjoy doing it. They just don't get to do it so much anymore.
Just put that Josh Jacobs stat into more perspective. Only the second ever receiving touchdown. He has 74 rushing touchdowns. It's a real anomaly in the statistics. Other bits of news: we've got Garrett Wilson's been shut down for the season. So's Jaden Daniels. No surprises really on either of those. I just want to touch on the Jags before we get into our playoff predictions. Jacoby Myers has looked excellent.
Yeah,
absolutely excellent since he's gone over there, and has just been rewarded with a 3-year, £60 million or $60 million even extension, which frankly is well deserved for the performances he's been turning in there. And I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say Trevor Lawrence had his best game in the NFL on Sunday. Albeit, you have to add the caveat, it was against the Jets, who aren't great, who have since fired their defensive coordinator. But Lawrence had 5 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown, I believe. A lot of them going to Travis Etienne, who had 3 touchdowns, I think, on the day.
Also against me in that same Josh Jacobs fantasy football league. So thanks for bringing that one up as well. I got dunked on in that league by our friend John. So that was going to say,
but you also got dunked on by your best friend in the league, who only really is into the NFL because we've forced him to watch it.
Same person I advised to pick up Rico Dowdle used him against me. I know it's a cruel, cruel world in fantasy, isn't it? I'd go as far on the Trevor Lawrence topic as saying that is probably the greatest game he will ever play in the NFL, statistically speaking. Now, you might say, oh, well, how could you possibly say that? He's going to have a really long career. It wasn't that long ago that people were saying, will he have a really long career? And then the other point to that is these games don't come around that often. You're not saying he won't have a big game, just not a 6 touchdown game. I think that's a realistic prediction to make. But that being said, he, with Jacoby Myers, just seems to be cooking differently now. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why he can't put it together with Brian Thomas Jr. and why Brian Thomas Jr. with Mac Jones looked so fluid, but Trevor looks good with Jacoby Myers. It doesn't make any sense to me, but there you go.
What was another wild stat from that Jags game I saw was that after, I think it was 5 minutes and 43 seconds. No, it was with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. The Jags had a 97% win percentage, according to Next Gen Stats. 97% after 10 minutes. That
Wow.
is as diabolical a start. Can you imagine going to that as a Jets fan? You know the season's done. Part of the Jets fans are probably like, look, lose, get a better draft pick. But to go to Florida, to go to that game, spend the money, and then within 10 minutes see your team with a 3% chance is hilariously funny. Sorry to any Jets fans listening,
If you live in the New York or New Jersey area and you've gone in the month of December to Florida to watch an NFL game, I'm willing to hazard a guess that with the state of football in New York right now, the city, not the state, that if you are making that trip, you are doing it not because of the football, but more so because you would quite like a little winter break, get some, kind of 70, maybe even 80 degrees temperature, because I hear New York can be a little bit bitterly cold this time of year. So I would argue you're probably doing that for a bit of a long weekend away. You might also happen to go see a football game along the way. What I will say is, on the topic of watching this game, I don't know about you, Phil. I don't know if Katie sometimes walks in on you watching the NFL and makes a comment.
Katie likes to walk in and look at the screen, and I've resisted doing sort of the viral videos that you see people in America do, where they guess that they get their wives or their fiancés to try and name the teams based on the logos. And that's what Katie does. She walks in, she goes,
Okay.
"It's the big green G." It's like, the Packers, yeah.
Yep.
We're kind of getting there now. I reckon half the teams she can do it. Hey, if you want to get my missus on the podcast, and we could do the quiz. If we want to do Connie v Katie at some point
Connie v Katie might take some
NFL
persuading.
That will take some persuading, but yeah, maybe one for the future.
So Connie's comment from this weekend was on entry. It was a clip of Jacksonville. There were plenty of clips on Red Zone of Jacksonville torching the Jets, but it was specifically everybody in the famous kind of swimming pool that you have at Jaguars. Jaguar Stadium, right? To which she was not impressed with the idea that you could be in a swimming pool, which I was surprised with. I thought, that's been such a big thing that people are like, oh yeah, they've got a swimming pool. You can actually just sit there and have a beer whilst bobbing around. She did not love the idea of just being at a sports venue and basically bobbing around with it wasn't a great look. I will say it didn't capture its good side. So yeah, she was pretty horrified by that, which surprised me ultimately, because it's such a big topic.
I think I can see both sides of this argument, because I if I was going to a football game, particularly like a real soccer game now, talking, whether that would be my team or just a big game, there's no way I'd want to be in a swimming pool. I'd want to be in the thick of it, in the crowd. On the other hand, if I'm in Florida and it's kind of a nothing game and my team's got basically 100% chance after the first quarter, a beer in a pool and watching the rest, it seems, I can kind of get on board with that.
Just don't submerge yourself, because it would be a bad watch. But no, I think going back to Jacoby Myers as well, I think one thing I really do love to see in this league is players they've just been like really, really solid. Like, he came through on a relatively bad Patriots team, really, when you think about kind of the era of the Patriots teams that he came through, and he just forged his kind of slot role there. Went to the Raiders, which wasn't exactly I mean, he was good, but it hasn't really been successful for the team. And then obviously, he seems to now be on a Jags team that is kind of on the upward trajectory, and playing a really, really key role. I couldn't tell you if there's been a mid-season offensive acquisition in recent memory as successful as Jacoby Myers. Really, sometimes you get like a pass rusher will get inserted in, like a Von Miller on the Los Angeles Rams, for example. But I mean, generally speaking, it takes a long time for offensive players sometimes to acclimatize and get up to speed. But he seems to have had an immediate rapport with Trevor Lawrence. And yeah, it's losing Travis Hunter now doesn't seem to be such a big issue. And whatever is going on with Brian Thomas Jr., also he can kind of play second fiddle now.
Yeah, he's had 4 or more catches in every game he's had for the Jags. He's had 39 or more yards and 3 touchdowns. Minimum 39 yards in each game and 3 touchdowns in that span as well. So, it's really hit the ground running, as we say. And the Jags are one of the teams in sort of the feature part of today's podcast. As mentioned last time, at the end of last episode, I asked you to name the teams that could be ruled out. Since we had that conversation, the Vikings, the Falcons, the Saints, the Commanders, the Jets, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, all out of the running. As I mentioned right at the top, there are now 9 teams that can make it in the AFC, 10 in the NFC, if we're including the Cowboys, who technically can get in, although even with a win, their percentage goes up to 2%, and they have to massively rely on results elsewhere. So because it is looking quite set right now, out of the teams on the bubble, the Colts, God bless Philip Rivers throwing a touchdown. It was a real good moment. I loved that. But it wasn't to be. It's crazy how the Colts held the Seahawks to 6 field goals and no touchdowns. And then last night they just tore the Rams defense apart. It was very, very bizarre. That's a discussion for another time. But the Colts only have a 12% chance of making the playoffs. The Ravens have a 40% chance, but that's only realistically by winning the division because they're a game behind the Steelers. The other teams in the wild card, unless Philip Rivers can turn the Colts season around, which is looking unlikely, then it looks like the top 7, or at least the playoff teams, with the exception of the Steelers and the Ravens, is set in the AFC. In the NFC, you've got the Panthers and the Lions, who still have a chance, but even if those teams win this weekend, they still have a below 50% chance of getting into the playoffs. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the standings as they are now. There will probably be some shifting, particularly in those wild card spots between now and the end of the season. Some teams have a really easy run in, some teams have a horrible schedule, but we're going to try and predict who the Super Bowl contenders, or who will be in the Super Bowl, should the season have finished. The 1 seeds, as things stand, have both already clinched their playoff spots. That's the Denver Broncos and the LA Rams. Then in the AFC, we have the Patriots, the Jags, the Steelers, the Chargers, the Bills, and the Texans, which will be fun because both of our teams are in that. And then on the other side of things, you have the Bears, the Eagles, the Bucks, the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Packers. Which one do you want to start with, Jake? Do you want to start with the AFC or the NFC?
Let's go NFC first, shall we? Because I feel like we can bring it home with both of our teams in the opposite playoffs.
Leave our fun to the end. Okay, absolutely. As things stand, we actually have the game which is taking place this Sunday. So we'll see if we can predict this. You'd obviously have the Rams going through, and then you have the Bears against the Packers at Soldier Field, exactly what the game is this weekend. Now, obviously, a win for the Packers this weekend could completely flip the script, and it could be very, very different, these standings. But we already talked about it. Micah Parsons out. We don't have time to go through every game in great detail, but how would you see this one going if it happened today? Well, it will happen on Sunday.
Well, it will. Yeah, I mean, so I do see Chicago coming out on top here. I know obviously I said that the Packers, and they can't really be ruled out, and they were a solid team before Micah, and they should be able to adjust now. But I think the difference that we're going to see is with a team such as the Packers, we are going to see now that quarterbacks will have more time in the pocket. We're going to find that their secondary, which, to be honest, hasn't been phenomenal. When you've got someone like Micah Parsons breathing down your neck, and as a quarterback, you're under pressure, you throw that pass that maybe you shouldn't have, or you're maybe a bit more hurried than you would have liked when making it, you can afford for your secondary to be a little bit more average in terms of coverage and in terms of anticipation. That's now no longer going to be the case. So the Green Bay secondary is going to have to play incredibly well. Now, this week, Chicago have got some pass catchers still missing, still banged up. They've done a really good job in terms of their running efficiency lately, and I think obviously that will help set them up against a team like Green Bay. I'd expect them to probably own the clock. I would side with Chicago in both this Sunday, and then obviously if there is a kind of a playoff matchup as well. I just think that a calm and composed Caleb Williams is going to be able to do things, and I think that this Chicago team under Ben Johnson is really starting to find its groove.
Yeah, I would also have the Bears going through in this hypothetical. I just think Caleb Williams has really stepped it up this year. He's so elusive in the pocket. I swear every time on the red zone the Bears come up, he's under pressure and he always escapes. He's remarkably good at it. So yeah, and when they get all their receivers back, when Roma Dunze's fit again, I think they what a season they're having. What a season it's been for the Bears. I don't think we expected this. I don't think anyone expected this. I know James, our Bears writer, certainly didn't expect this. He was hoping for an improving season on last year with Ben Johnson's first one, but they were the 1 seeds as of a few weeks ago, and they're currently the number 2 seeds. So, yeah, let's both have the Bears going through. Next game is the Eagles and the 49ers. Now, the 49ers potentially, there's whispers that Fred Warner might return in the playoffs, which would be crazy. That would be crazy. The Eagles they had their sort of get back on track game against the Raiders in week 15. But again, a bit like what we were saying about the Jags, it was the Raiders. Every team is blowing past those, but they did so and they shut them out. So, all you can do is beat what's in front of you, as the cliche goes. The 49ers, I've said a few times on this podcast that if they make the playoffs, that Kyle Shanahan should be coach of the year, given the injuries that they dealt with. And they now have a 98% chance if they win against the Colts, which you would fancy them to do this weekend, they would go up to an over 99% chance. So I think he's done a remarkable job this season as Shanahan. He has his critics at times, but what a job with all the players that he's had to deal with being out. That includes the quarterback, half the defense. And I'll go first this time. I would fancy the 49ers to beat the Eagles just on form and momentum at the moment. The Eagles, obviously reigning Super Bowl champions, would not be an easy game in any stretch for Shanahan. But the 49ers have won more games this year. I know the Eagles are the 3 seed as the division winners, but they haven't won as many games as the 49ers, who, as I keep saying, are in absolute tatters in terms of injuries. So, I'd have the 49ers going through if it was the case. And I get the sense you're going to disagree with me.
So my head would say that I completely see where you're coming from with the 49ers. I definitely think that they are more to call them the form team is almost a bit odd because they're 3rd in their division and they have had a couple of stinkers here and there along the way. Things haven't always looked great, but they are winning. And like you said, they've won more games. I think the issue for me with that particular team coming into it is I like to, particularly when you get into the playoffs and you get into these tight situations, which unit is going to dominate a game. And I think for me, when you look at the 4 units that would be on the field, I think we can say that the Eagles offense has largely sucked at points, and Eagles fans have not been shy in letting Nick Sirianni know how they feel about that. The 49ers defense hasn't been particularly solid either. I think pass rushing wise, they've really struggled to get to the quarterback this year. That's just allowed for quarterbacks to sit back in the pocket and really operate. Shanahan's offenses have always been relatively, efficient and solid. And I think the one thing that will stand out to me the most is that this Eagles defense has been playing really, really well. And Vic Fangio has got them really working. And I think that Brock Purdy going into Philadelphia in January, facing that defense, getting heated up by Fangio with some of the looks that he will give him, I think that that's what ultimately wins this. And I think that what the offense will go in and manage is they will say, okay, we know that the Niners won't be able to get a massive amount of pressure on Jalen Hurts. Just don't lose the game. Like, do enough to put ourselves in positions to maybe we're going to kick more, whatever it will be. I think that they will knuckle down, and they've tried changing things around recently. I just think that I look at that and I say, Brock Purdy, his ultra aggressive style will be what hinges on that. And if Fangio can turn that to his advantage, then I'd still favour the Eagles in that scenario. Maybe if it was in Santa Clara, I'd look differently on it. But yeah, in Philadelphia, I'd still side with the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, I would lean the 49ers, but not with any great conviction. The final game in the wildcard round, as again, if the season finished today, would be a rematch of one of the best games of this season that I've watched, which was the Bucks against the Seahawks. Now, at the time, the Bucks came out on top. It was a thrilling game. I can't remember what the final score was, but it was something like 42-39 or something crazy like that. But since that game, these are two teams that feel like they're going in different directions. The Bucks have still got a 500 record, but at 7-7, the wheels have fallen off them. They've had some really bad losses. When you let Kyle Pitts do what Kyle Pitts did the other day, you've got some problems on defense. They can't seem to stop the run. I think Kyle Pitts had 7% of his entire career's fantasy points in that game the other day, which was a great stat that I very much enjoyed. And there would be against the Seahawks, who, as we've already talked about, just beat the number one seeds, the Rams, on Thursday Night Football. And even though Darnold has his wobbles and his moments, they've got arguably the best receiver in form other than Puka Nacua in the league in JSN. They're already on a above 99% chance to make the playoffs. It's going to be a case of, do they win the division and be maybe the number one seeds, or are they going to be like the Vikings were last year, ironically, with Sam Darnold, with 12, 13 wins and still a wildcard team? But I think of all the questions we're going to ask today, this is the easiest and the easiest one to decide for me, because I think this would be an easy Seahawks win.
So I absolutely agree, because unfortunately at this point the Buccaneers are the walking wounded. The Seahawks, and even if this isn't the Seahawks, and I suppose the argument would be is this being the Rams instead, if it does kind of work out that way, I think both would be one of those kind of playoff matchups that it's going to go against the seeding. I suppose the one, if I could put a P under the mattress of this game, you've got a West Coast team traveling to Florida to play a game where, depending on how the schedule goes, if they schedule that as a early slate playoff match, then you've got the kind of time difference of how early that then becomes for the either Seattle or Los Angeles to play. And to be honest, this isn't something that really, when it comes down to it in the playoffs, it really isn't something that should decide it. But you've got to look for like the little things to say, if there's a glimmer of hope there for Tampa, is that you're hosting the game, you're dragging a team all the way over from the West Coast, to you in Florida, and you've got a chance that if you have a nice early kickoff, that's even earlier for them in terms of their body clocks. I mean, I'm clutching at straws here, but it's the best I can do, Phil.
And I'm not to shut you down, but the Seahawks have travelled to the East Coast 4 times this year, and they've won all 4 games. So it is a P under the mattress for you, Princess, but it is a small P. It is a very, very small P.
I just really wanted this season to end differently for Baker. Like, not even he doesn't need to be left in the Lombardi, but this season for Baker, the MVP talk was real. Like, it was so real. Like, he carried that injured team through the worst of it. Now they're still injured, but it just seems to have kind of cooled off a little bit. And, if the Carolina Panthers hadn't thrown away a game last Sunday pretty much, then we wouldn't even be talking about Tampa right now. So, it's just such a shame for such a kind of plucky, kind of moxie individual like Baker that's just ending in such like a fizzled kind of way. So it's not what I really would have wanted, which is ultimately probably going to be it's going to be like a 3 to 4 interception game against the Seahawks defense. They'll probably have a pick 6 in there as well, which will just be a sad way for their season to end.
I do like the end of season divisional games, because the Bucks and the Panthers play each other twice in this final 3 weeks of the season. Talk about pressure. Both on 7-7 with a division on the line. You mentioned the Panthers briefly. Obviously, I think they got swept by the Saints, which is insane when you look at the games that they've also won this season. One of the weirdest teams in the NFL, particularly that whole division is weird teams this season. Charlie Smith, the Irish kicker, unfortunately, we mentioned last time that we were hoping to get him on. Really frustratingly, the only day that he was available to chat was the day I was traveling for work, so wasn't able to nail him down. But he signed a new 3-year deal with the Saints today, so it looks like he's the kicker of the future. So we will, at some point on the podcast, get Charlie on. I'm sure of it. And congrats to him, because kicked that game winner and is now full time on that Saints roster moving forward. And wish him all the best. So, given our predictions here, it would be the Rams then going through. We both agree on the Bears. We both agree on the Seahawks. We have a debate over the Eagles and the 49ers. What we'll do, for the sake of clarity, is we can both give our own picks, but we'll go with the Eagles because they're the highest seed if there's a tiebreaker. So that would mean the wild card game, the divisional game would be the Rams against the Seahawks. How exciting would that be? Again, to see that a replay of Thursday. And despite the fact we've just seen it, I would back the Rams.
Well, I think that one thing that really stood out for me in that game was the fact that, no Devontae Adams, and suddenly the red zone efficiency for the Rams. Obviously everyone likes to take the screenshot of the fact the Rams are up big by 14 kind of points on the Seahawks late in that game. They should have been up by more. They made at least 3 trips to the red zone where they then just resulted in a field goal. And I think there's an argument there to be said that it's probably all season we've seen that Devontae Adams is like the most targeted receiver in the red zone. It must be so frustrating for Puka Nacua fantasy owners and owners of Kyren Williams that you get down to the 2-yard line and you think, oh, this is prime position now for Kyren to run it in. And Matt Stafford will just spend 3 downs targeting Devontae Adams. And maybe we've kind of seen why, because actually, for whatever reason, that's kind of where their red zone efficiency has been. So I think if Devontae's back, I absolutely back the Rams. I think if he's not, then even if it's in SoFi, I think I'd go Seahawks by this point. I think defense is going to be key, and I think they are the ascending defense in the league at the moment.
So you would have the Rams if Adams is back?
Yes, but if we are saying that as of right now he's not back because he has a 32-year-old hamstring, then I'm willing to say Seahawks. So I'm interested to see which direction you're going to take this. You said Rams, didn't you?
I'm going Rams even if Adams is out. I think the being on prime time, the atmosphere at Lumen Field last night, and they obviously narrowly lost it to a very controversial decision, which we've already talked about. Stafford had a hell of a game, and Darnold, he did, beat the ghosts of his performances against the Rams. But if I've got a quarterback in that game and I need to pick Stafford or Darnold in a clutch playoff game, give me Stafford every day of the week, with or without Adams. So, I lean the Rams in that. If the 49ers were to get through over the Eagles, as I predicted, I would also have the Rams to beat them. So the Rams would be going through, from my estimations, regardless. The other game then for your side of the predictions would be the Bears against the Eagles, which would be a really interesting game. Again, it would be at Soldier Field. And I don't think this game will come to pass, obviously, as I've said. But the Bears are such a strange team, because we really struggle, as fans, to move on from our thoughts pre-season. What we think at the start of the season, yes, it will change as the season goes on, but you still look at the Bears. I still do the same with the Patriots and go 11-3, really? And we said it when we were doing our AFC East predictions a few weeks ago, I still predicted the Bills to win the division. Now, the Bills obviously beat the Patriots last week, and it's still possible, but it's still unlikely for the Bills. They still need to overcome the Patriots. And I just think we struggle to move on, even though the numbers and the stats are staring us in the face, which is why I look at the Bears against the Eagles and I immediately just think the Eagles. I immediately think the Eagles will win that game. But I think if I looked into it more, I think I would lean the side of the Bears.
Well, they've already done it, for starters. And not just done it, going into Lincoln Financial Field and limiting the Eagles to 15 points on home field, beating them by 9 as well, so being more than a score up. which is something that Philadelphia just haven't really experienced all that much, being more than the score down. I don't really think their offense is geared towards chasing games. I think that the Bears will ultimately do it again. Obviously I did say that the Eagles would go through, so I think that realistically, if this comes to pass, I think they'll be outcoached. I think Ben Johnson's got his feet under the table now, and I just think that he is the better play caller than pretty much everyone bar probably Fangio on the Eagles side of the ball. And yeah, I think that the Bears would get this win as well. I can't believe how deep the Bears are going in this playoff run ultimately that we've got, because it seems like such an alien concept, but there we go.
On my side of the draw, I would have the Seahawks to beat the Bears. So on my prediction path, this is where it ends for Chicago, even in Soldier Field, because I think the Seahawks are very good. As much as I said, I wouldn't trust Stafford. Sorry, I wouldn't trust Darnold over Stafford. I would trust Darnold on a par with Caleb Williams, who would never have experienced a game of that magnitude in his career. Obviously, he's only in his second year. Can't blame him for that. But yeah. So our two NFC games, my NFC championship game would be the Rams against the Seahawks, and yours would be the Rams with Adams or the Seahawks if Adams is out against the Bears.
Yeah, so we'll for the sake of it, we believe that Devonta Adams will be back. So yes. I'll say that the Rams will be going through for the sake of our algorithm, should we say?
Yes.
So I think if we're heading into Rams versus Bears in Los Angeles, I think that this is where it would end for the Bears as well. Reason being, and I think that there's a reason to be optimistic about this. So Caleb Williams, would you like to have a guess at where he ranks in all quarterbacks this season in completion percentage?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, because you've asked the question, it's going to be high. I don't think it's going to be first, but our top three?
Top three? No. So it's a bit of a cruel statistic, because there's obviously players in here that haven't even played full games, right? So there's statistics all over the place. Caleb Williams' completion percentage this season is 58%, which is actually, it's good for 64th in the league. Obviously there's loads of quarterbacks in there that are like, Dylan Gabriel's in there that's higher than him. Cam Ward is higher than him, right? So Caleb hasn't been overly accurate this season still, yet our overall perception of him is that he's been really, really good, or much better than we saw last season, much more measured. Phil, how good is he going to be once he starts hitting 63, 64, 65%? Like, seriously, because that additional 5 or 6%, if you put him in the region of, Daniel Jones this year was 68%. If Caleb Williams completes 10% more of his passes, this Bears team could get really, really good. Because right now that additional percentage is that he's lacking will be the difference between some of those drives stalling. And the Bears right now have a great record already. So I think that, they're going to lose to the Rams in this situation, just because the Rams are the more complete outfit. And I don't see, like you say, it's a great point that Caleb on that scene in the NFC Championship game, it might be a bit much. But I think the future's bright. I think they found their QB of the future, and I think they can go into the offseason knowing that, yes, they're in a hell of a division for the foreseeable, but nobody wants to be in the Bears division. So it's future's very, very bright for them if he can sort out his completion percentage.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. And if they find a safety in the draft, they get a bit more edge rushers to improve that defensive line. The defensive line hasn't been great. It's just mainly on the defensive side of the ball. In fact, looking at the NFL here, the 4 biggest needs for the draft next year for the Bears are safety, edge, defensive lineman, and cornerback. So they don't care about the offense. They think the offense is good enough. It's on the defensive line where, on the defense as a whole, that the Bears need to improve. And I would also have the Rams to beat the Seahawks. in my NFC Championship game. So we'd both have the Rams going to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Let's move on to the AFC, because I think some of these games are closer and harder to call. Obviously, the Broncos, as things stand, to go through as the number 1 seed. So the wild card round, this game, first one up, would be a great game, I think. Patriots against the Texans, because the Texans are that, you know, we get this cliche every year, and I can't tell you the number of podcasts or commentators and broadcasters and pundits who've used this phrase that I've heard over the last week. But the Texans are the team nobody wants to face in the playoff, because they have probably, the Broncos are the other team that could probably claim this. Maybe the Chargers in the last few weeks, but the best defense in the NFL probably goes to Houston this year. They have been lights out from the defensive line all the way back to the DBs, electrically good. And CJ Stroud has started to put it together in the last few weeks. Obviously had a bit of a blip, both sides of the Davis Mills. Was it a 3-game win streak or 4-game win streak for Davis Mills?
Yeah.
But yeah, Stroud's improving. He's looking better. He's looking like that guy in his rookie season that we kind of all like waxed lyrical about. And this would be no easy game. I know, I laugh about the cliche, but this would be a really tough game for Drake May and the New England Patriots, who of course are coming off that game where they lost to yourselves, the Buffalo Bills, last week from a 21-point lead.
Yeah.
You messaged us at 21-0 going, oh my God, are we going to get blown out by the Patriots? Turns out it was a remarkable comeback by Josh Allen and co. So that's put a bit of a tint on this Patriots team, because the narrative around them all year has been the schedule's been soft. It's been really easy. And I know they beat the Bills in the other game, but the Bills now was one of the harder teams that they had to face, and they didn't do it, and they threw away a lead. So I'll let you go first on this one, because I haven't made my mind up yet. Patriots, Texans in New England at Foxborough. Who you got?
So short answer is I've got the Texans.
Wow.
And I do think that that's just simply because if the Patriots can pray for snow, right, and turn this into a run game, there is a chance. If Will Campbell is not on the field for the Patriots, then that's a major concern. He wasn't on the field against the Bills, and yeah, it massively aided that. Even with Will Campbell on the field, I don't even think that anyone's really stopping this Texans front. But the only way you really can is to get in, get your run game running, and really hope that you don't find yourself needing to play catch up, because the second the defensive ends are going to pin their ears back and go for Drake May, the game's pretty much over. So I think that would be the strategy that Vrabel would come in. It would be a very run-heavy game, but I don't trust that it's going to be enough. I don't think there's going to be enough of an opportunity for the Texans to stop this Patriots offense and not really have to do much in return in order to get the win. I know that's surprising, but I don't have the stat, but I know that the Patriots haven't really faced many, if any, top 10 defenses this season. I believe that was a statistic that was the case before they played the Bills, and the Bills definitely don't have a top 10 defense. So I think that's still true. So it's going to be a bit of a culture shock for them to suddenly receive the Houston Texans in January.
I think you've persuaded me. I think I'm going to join you on the side of the Texans. What I think is going to be absolutely wild is I feel like there's a chance that you're going to pick all 3 non-division winners here.
Ooh, okay.
I think there's a chance. The next game, 3rd seed Jags in Duval County against the Buffalo Bills, your team. Both teams currently on 10-4. Bills almost, they're in the playoffs, basically. The odds of them not making it is impossible, really. The Jags almost there, 97% chance for them. And, going on what I just said, I think you would back your boys.
You think that, but I'm not, because
okay.
Yeah, because fundamentally, this Jaguars run defense has been pretty solid. The one thing the Bills absolutely have to have is they have to be able to get in run script, and they have to be able to run the ball. I don't trust that they can then hold up on the defensive side. So if the Jags can get up a few scores, I would be really concerned about the idea of the Bills coming back into the game. Now, admittedly, I know we've just seen the Bills do that against the Patriots. They literally came back from 21-0. The Bills have a great home record, but not a great away record. I know we just won in Foxborough as well. I'm not drawing too much from kind of a one-off sample size against the Patriots. I think that we've been upset by the Jaguars a few times in recent kind of living memory. We don't have a great away record, and I just don't see. I would anticipate a big kind of day for someone like Travis Etienne. So, yeah, unfortunately, I actually think the Jaguars would probably put an end to the Bills season. And Lord knows what the Mafia would then make of that for coaches and GMs alike. But no, I'm pretty worried about that matchup, if I'm being completely honest. There are a few other matchups that I prefer over the Jaguars, but we'd have to play them if we wanted to get through anyway. So, we may as well play them early.
I would back Josh Allen. I just rate Josh Allen so highly. I think that as good as the Jags run defenses is, James Cook and Josh Allen as that 1-2 sort of tandem quarterback running back duo look like they can run over most teams, and I just think the Bills got a little bit more quality than the Jags. But like you say, this isn't the unbeatable Bills that we've seen during the regular season in the last few seasons. There's a lot of chinks in the armor, but I would back the Bills. Then the final game is my team, the Chargers against the Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers are the team in the AFC who have the lowest percentage chance of getting in. In fact, of all the teams we talk about today, they're the team with the lowest percentage because the Ravens are on their tails. What the Steelers have going for them is that the Ravens have to play New England this week, which is obviously not going to be easy. But we're going on the hypothetical of if the season ended today. Chargers traveling to Acrisure, I believe is the name of the stadium in Pittsburgh, if my memory serves me correctly, to take on the Steelers. Oh, I would hate this so much. Because, the Steelers' pass rush is pretty good. And I don't want to talk about the Chargers' offensive line anymore. We've talked about it every week.
But the Chargers, obviously, the Chargers sent their doctor over to see TJ Watt, so it might not be as good. That doctor's been out with the really long syringe needle again, poking people in places he's got no right. So you don't know about that pass rush. It might not be as solid as you think. Yeah,
maybe not. And even if it is, I back the Chargers' defense against Aaron Rodgers, particularly because their weapons on offense are limited. Or DK Metcalf's great. We all know how good he is and how fast and strong he is. But Jesse Minter in 2 straight weeks has cooked up an absolute dream defensive scheme against the two Super Bowl teams from this year, and the Chargers have won both of them, even with Justin Herbert playing with a hand twice the size and struggles. He's had his interceptions troubles this year, but I don't want to say it, but I think I'd fancy us against the Steelers. I don't want to say it.
Reluctantly putting you through in the playoffs. Yeah.
Justin Herbert's never won a playoff game, and Peyton Manning didn't win one for his 5th year, and Justin Herbert, if he gets 200 yards per game in the last 3 years, still the last 3 weeks of the season, will break Peyton Manning's record for the most passing yards in the first 5 seasons in the NFL. So he just passed Patrick Mahomes last week, which felt like the passing of the torch, obviously, as they beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at Arrowhead. That was quite a nice moment for Herbert. But yeah, I'm going to regrettably say the Chargers win this game, and then listen to you tell me I'm wrong.
No, so why are we so bearish on our own teams? Because I'm so confident.
I backed my team.
Yeah, barely. And I'll say as well, I'm facing the Jaguars. If I was facing the Steelers, I'd be on the Bills side as well. But if you were facing the Jaguars, I don't think you'd be on the Chargers side potentially. So there's something to say there. I'm all in on the Chargers if this is the matchup. I think that there is no question. So if we go back to my same mantra about, I was talking about the Eagles earlier and which unit comes out on top of the field. I think there are 2 units here that ultimately will dictate it. One, the Steelers cannot cope with the run game at the moment, particularly a physical run game. So not just kind of zone running, like we saw with the Dolphins, who like to kind of get out in space. We're not talking about that. We're talking about punch in the mouth run game. That's what the Bills did, and they put a incredible number of rushing yards on the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Really manhandled them. If you think that there's one tactic offensively that Greg Roman and Harbour are going to turn up and want to impose, it's going to be exactly that. So I'd expect Harbour to just come out swinging in that sense. And then, defensively, you got a statue of a quarterback. Jesse Minter has got that defense playing unbelievably well. He doesn't have to worry about him moving out of the pocket. So, yeah, I absolutely think the Chargers come out kind of winning that matchup. Both sides of the ball, I'd be pretty confident.
Thanks for the confidence boost.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Chargers we both have going through, but slightly different levels of confidence in that. Your divisional round game then, first one, and we'll try and breeze through these because we have been chatting for way too long. Broncos against the Texans. In fact, we both have that. The Broncos against the Texans. And I think this is where the Texans run comes to an end. For me, I would fancy the Broncos here, and that's not because I had a bet on them in preseason. I've waited over an hour to have my slightly smug face that my preseason bet in February, on the 8th of February, was that the Broncos and the Rams would be the Super Bowl. And while that's not, it's still a long way off that. They are the first two teams to reach the playoffs. They are the number one seeds as things stand. We'll soon see if we both predict the Broncos to get to the Super Bowl. We already picked the Rams, both of us. But yeah, I would have the Broncos to beat the Texans here because I think the Broncos' offense is slightly better than the Texans, and they're both elite defenses.
I mean, this is the grossest playoff game, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, these two defenses playing against each other would be a lot. I think going to Mile High, playing outdoors as it would be, I think is probably a step too far for the Texans. And not saying they can't do it. I just, these things will be favouring the home team. I would expect Denver off the bye week to probably get the job done there. There's not really much more to say because when you've got two defensive situations like that, the game will turn on a head. There's not like someone's run game is just going to bleed the game. No, I mean, we're talking Derek Stingley could have a pick six here and suddenly everything goes out the window. It's entirely possible. So, but I would probably go kind of lean Broncos there. I think, again, the first seed is so important in these situations.
This was the game that CJ Stroud got injured in when they played earlier in the season. Back then, the Texans were 3-5 after this game. Didn't score a touchdown all day. Fairbairn kicking 5 field goals. Bo Nix, because of how good the Texans defense is, had below 50% completion rate, but did throw 2 touchdowns in that game. And yeah, RJ Harvey and Cortland Sutton are the ones catching those. It was 18-15. It was only 33 points in the game, and I would imagine a very similar sort of scoreline if this game comes to pass in the playoffs. But like that game, I would have the Broncos edging it. Then we have to decide. You have to pick then between the Jaguars and the Chargers, and I have to pick between the Chargers and the Bills.
So, so this I think would be where, unfortunately for you, Phil, even though I've kind of given you that boost of confidence, I'm going to have to remind you that it doesn't matter how much Justin Herbert gets up in this game. In the back of everybody's mind is going to be the playoff matchup that got blown.
Yeah, and not only that, which we don't like to talk about, but when the Jags played the Chargers this year, it's the worst game the Chargers have played all season handsomely. Yeah. And the Jags won in a blowout 35-6 win where Justin Herbert completed 10 passes all day. Yeah. And he was the leading rusher with 21 yards. And I put a lot of that down to the fact that the Chargers had played something like 12 straight weeks, 15 if you include preseason. They look knackered. And since the bye, they're unbeaten. So I think there was a lot of it in, the case that the Chargers were just ruined in terms of energy levels and fitness in that game. And I think they would put on a much better showing than that day. But you're leaning the Jags here.
Yeah, I am. I think the Jags probably get that done, unfortunately for you.
Yeah, that's not my prediction. I have to choose between the Chargers and the Bills, which is me versus you, which would be absolutely horrible.
Tom
or
would
to
love
have
it
that.
so much.
Oh yeah, the boys would absolutely love to
Yeah.
see our teams going against each other. Although Tom could shove it because he's a Colts fan, and they're not in this hypothetical playoff situation.
Yeah.
Although God, I hope. I've said it already. If we can have Philip Rivers against the Chargers in the playoffs, that would be my absolute dream. But I think the odds of that are dwindling very quickly. I would have the Chargers against the Bills, and in the same fashion that I just really like Josh Allen, I how give me a grade on the Bills pass rush this year. I know Joey Bosa has more forced fumbles than anyone, and I would just have this horrible image of him playing the Chargers for the first time, smacking Justin Herbert's broken hand and forcing a fumble, and that ending the game.
So I can tell you our pass rush has not been great recently. I'll bring up the stat, but ultimately the Bills pass rush has been kind of ice cold in recent weeks, really bleak. So does that make you feel better?
Slightly, yeah.
Yeah.
It does make me feel slightly better, I have to admit. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it would be a game that the Bills win, although it would be in SoFi. So I think it would be a really close game. It would be a really close game. I'm looking at the Bills in middle of the pack for sacks with 31.
Yeah. So
Broncos have 10 more than any team, by the way. That, just to speak to their defense, they have 58, where the next best team is the Falcons on 48, and then the Browns, who have 47, but half of that is Myles Garrett.
So we might have 31 sacks, but 6 of those have come in the last 6 games. So we're averaging 1 sack per game over the last 6. So that means that 25 came in the first 8 games of the season. So
Right, so it has dropped off.
It's dropped off significantly, yeah.
Well, maybe the Chargers win. No, I'm going to stick with my gut there and say that that's where the Chargers season would end, and then look to next year when you have your 2 Pro Bowl level tackles back, and then really chase the Lombardi.
Yeah.
So our predicted AFC Championship games, yours is the Jaguars going to the Broncos, and I have the Bills going to the Broncos. I will let you start with your prediction.
So I don't really love doing this because this means that both first seeds are making it to the Super Bowl, but I'm really struggling to find a scenario where the Jaguars are really going to top the Broncos. It's just really difficult to see. Trevor Lawrence, I said earlier, he's maybe had the best game statistically. He might have to have the best performance of his career to go to Denver and to beat them. It might not necessarily be the best statistics, but in terms of game managing the win, it probably would be. And you know what? Maybe he's got it in the locker. I think that arguably, if you really wanted to go head to head, which obviously it isn't the case, but Trevor Lawrence has probably shown us a little bit more than Bo Nix. I know Bo Nix hasn't been in the league anywhere near as long, but yeah, I'm struggling to kind of. I want to go with the Jaguars, I really do, because I don't want it to just be the first seed. But yeah, I'm struggling to look past the Broncos, so I'm heading for a Broncos Rams Super Bowl, aren't I?
You are heading for a Broncos Rams Super Bowl.
How does that feel?
And so am I.
No.
And I've got to stick with my gut, as I've said multiple times on this podcast. I'm stubborn, and when I've made a prediction, and when I've made a prediction that looks vastly incorrect, I will obviously step back and go, yeah, I made an error there. But until this bet looks like it's not possible, I'm gonna keep riding it. Broncos country, let's ride, and let's take Denver. I will take Denver to beat the Bills in a really close game at Mile High, and we both have the number 1 seeds going through, which will never happen. We said right at the top that won't happen. And unfortunately, that means the bet won't happen. And probably, let's hope for my prediction that they aren't the 2 1 seeds come the end, although it is a massive advantage.
I mean, when the Broncos pulled off the victory this Sunday, there was a point where they obviously weren't winning, and I thought, hang on a minute, the Bills have already beaten the Patriots at this point. There is a scenario, the Patriots are playing Baltimore, and this is a Baltimore team that needs to win desperately. Patriots have just been punched in the mouth. Like, we don't know how they're going to necessarily respond. I was sat there thinking, hang on a minute, like, we just need the Patriots to slip up once more, Bills need to win out against some teams that aren't in great form. There's a chance we could win the division. And then I thought, if the Broncos drop another game, we could be here. You know, they're losing right now. They just drop one more. It could be on here. We could be getting the first seed. I don't think that's obviously going to happen now. Now that game's in the books. I do think the Bills are the only team in the AFC that the Broncos would really fear, though. Beyond the Texans' defense, which they have a good chance they might face, I think the Bills are the only team that, even though they just have looked so disjointed at points, Josh Allen has beaten the Broncos just a year ago in the playoffs, and it was pretty handy in the end. You know, the Bills made Bo Nix pretty uncomfortable, and the offense kind of really put it to the defense. And even then, we knew that the Broncos were a rising force. So I don't know, maybe the Broncos would still beat the Bills in that situation, but I think the Bills are the only team that have the X factor that they could, on their day, turn up and ultimately beat anyone, including the Broncos.
Do you know the last team to beat the Broncos?
Was it the Bills?
It was the Chargers back in September.
Ah, yes, of course it was, yeah.
In week 3 was the last time the Broncos dropped a game. The Chargers are 5-0 in the division, which I can't believe I'm saying. And it does make that week 18 game potentially really interesting, because there's a good chance that both the Broncos and the Chargers will have, you know, almost certainly. It would be a miracle if both those teams haven't wrapped up a playoff spot come week 18. But if there's one game in it going into the week 18 matchup between the two, and the Chargers hold that 5-0 record in the division, it won't be a case of, you can just rest all your starters. They'll have to go for that game, both teams, for a, you know, home playoff game. Or potentially even AFC number 1 seed. That would have to be a remarkable end of the season for the Chargers. They would have to win out, and they have to play the Texans and the Broncos and the Dallas Cowboys this week, which won't be too easy either. But it's all possible. And interestingly, I've just seen it's the Broncos against the Jags this weekend. So that was your prediction where you lent the Broncos. We will see. And that game is at Mile High as well. So we'll have a few of the games that we had.
Good barometer,
as well. We will have games of this weekend. That's it. We have rambled on today. I will have all the predictions up on social media. You can tell us where we're wrong. I'm sure we'll both be completely wrong, and by the time the season ends, so a lot of those games probably won't even come to fruition in the end. Thank you very much for joining us this week on the HuddleUK podcast. I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. We will be back. Hopefully at some point we'll sneak in a bit of a chat over the festive period to record for next Saturday. But until then, have a great Christmas, have a great New Year, enjoy your weekend, good luck to your teams, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the HuddleUK podcast.